Hey everybody, Stinger here. I want to invite you to a pretty cool podcast.
Watch this film. Be quite nice. Have a good time. You'll be very evil. And you'll love that Danhausen.
Hey, this is Big Sexy Kevin Nash.
Yes, it is I, Big E, but more importantly, it is you.
And you might remember me from such YouTube greats as Being the Elite and Chris Daniels Almost Dies.
And if you're looking for the very best wrestling content, you better come to Good Mic Work Commentary.
And I'm just going to tell you now, as a role model, you got to tune into this because if you also want to be a role model, you got to learn from the best.
We have a rapport, and we have been so close over so many years. This is not a cameo or a paid endorsement in any regard. This is a message of friendship.
Man, we met 20 years ago, 21 years ago now. Time is flying, isn't it?
I want to wish you all the best in your YouTube channel, and hopefully I can maybe make a special guest appearance on there sometime.
And I used to say, hey, Greg Morgan, and he used to say, please call me Greg, and I wouldn't do it.
Good mic work. Commentaries.
Awesome YouTube channel. Now, if you've seen these videos before, you know what I'm talking about.
We would do verbal chain wrestling. You know, we'd be off in the yard, the schoolyard at recess.
And he's also a 40-year-old wrestling fan. That's a long damn time.
And we'd just be staring at each other, and he'd say, hammerlock. And I'd say, all right, I've reversed the hammerlock into a hammerlock of my own, then I put you in a headlock. And, you know, that would go on for hours.
He's not going to fill your head with bullshit. He's going to tell you real deal, what's up, and that's that.
Raw, SmackDown, NXT. This guy covers it all, my friends. I want you to go to his page, Good Mic Work on YouTube.
Check out Good Mic Work Commentaries on YouTube.
But we would have fun. We would run around. There would be a wooden hoop we would hit with a stick, and it would go down a hill.
I'm about to go and watch a few videos myself.
It's a very practical apparatus.
We're really lacking in the world right now with some people that have a freaking brain cells.
And now look at him. He has more YouTube views and subscribers than I do, and I'm fine with it because I played such an integral role in his upbringing.
Don't you dare be sour.
We always talked about wrestling. He was a big Lou Thez guy, and of course I had an affectation for the Hackenschmidts.
Clap for Good Mic Work Commentaries.
This is RJ City, a wrestling rock on tour.
And feel the power.
Listen to the podcast. Subscribe.
You are watching Good Mic Work Commentaries.
Good Mic Work Commentaries.
Good Mic Work Commentaries.
Good mic work commentaries.
Just want to encourage all you guys to check out Good Mic Work Commentaries.
And if you don't, we're going to have a problem.
Do it!
Do it.
Do it now!
Thanks a lot for the encomium and the nice words about my father's Hall of Fame induction.
Hope our paths cross again sometime down the road. Would love to shake your hand again, and good luck on this podcast.
And you don't just watch it one time. You can rewatch every single one of them.
And now, Good Mic Work Commentaries and Greg Morgan presents the Winged Eagle Podcast.
Happy Saturday. What's going on, guys? Good Mic Work Commentaries back at you with your Winged Eagle podcast for June 4th, 2022. We got a lot to get into today because right after we had a crazy Double or Nothing weekend last weekend and a big Dynamite on Wednesday, AEW dropped some massive news last night on AEW Rampage. CM Punk temporarily relinquishing his AEW title due to a foot injury. He needs surgery. There's going to be an interim champion crowned at Forbidden Door, and we're going to talk all about the details of that here because it was very confusing last night in terms of what the actual scenario for the title was. I think we had like 3 or 4 different things ricocheting around inside of our skulls, and no one really knew what the deal was. Now that we've had a full night to sleep on it, AEW has even released a press release detailing everything they have planned for the belt. So we now know what they are going to do in the next couple of weeks to crown an interim champion that will face CM Punk when he returns from injury. So that's the big story we're going to get into here today. I almost came up last night and did a quick video on the situation, but I didn't want to force out a video because we still didn't have a ton of information on it, and I just didn't want to force myself to come up here since we usually do a podcast on Saturday anyway. So we are here today to talk about CM Punk's injury, the future of the AEW title, what this means, are interim champions good or bad, and what the future holds there, and who is going to potentially win the title. The AEW rankings thing is kind of a little jumbled up and confusing as well. We'll unpack all of that. We're also going to get into the latest on the MJF situation. Of course, he had the big shoot promo pipe bomb thing on Dynamite, which was one of the craziest things I've ever fucking seen. And he is currently removed from AEW's roster page, so they are all in on this work. And we will see where that leads as well. And MJF could play into the title situation as well. You never know. We also had the death of Melanie Pillman this week. We'll talk a little bit about her. Sammy Guevara and Ty Conti got engaged in Paris. Congratulations for them. Jeff Jarrett was the latest guest on Broken Skull Sessions. I watched, I think, 80%, 90% of it last night before falling asleep, and we got some information to discuss there, talking about their heat and whatnot. Some news on Simone Johnson, Jake Atlas, Lacey Evans, and Ric Flair will round out the news, and then we will basically just predict Hell in the Cell. Hell in the Cell is coming up here tomorrow, of course, after the pay-per-view tomorrow night. We will be up here for a full show review on Hell in the Cell, so we will predict that whole card, and we will preview tonight's In Your House. This podcast is going to be airing right before In Your House. We're going to be, it's going to be finishing, right before In Your House begins, I believe at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific here on the East Coast, or on the West Coast, so that gives us 2 hours to get this over with, but I think it's going to be more around an hour because Good Mic Work is under the weather. How about that? I come back from Vegas on Monday after a Double or Nothing. We get back really, really late. And I was even up here on Wednesday to do the watch-along. We watched the MJF pipe bomb together. But during that time, I was feeling a little bit off. And it's so funny, like, how you know your body. Ever since COVID started, I've been around uncomfortable amounts of people, almost, in an annoying way due to work and stuff. And I've been around people breathing on me, and I'm just like, I'm going to get COVID. And I never got it, never even felt close to sick. Even a couple of weeks ago, you guys remember I was under the weather for like a full week here. Even that didn't make me think I had COVID. I took a test just to be sure, but it was mostly just, I was just oddly under the weather. And I didn't think it was COVID. It was just, having a cold or having the sniffles or whatnot. So about Wednesday night when we're watching the show together, I'm not feeling right. And then the next day on Thursday, I kind of knew it. I'm like, I'm going to take a test. I'm going to take a COVID test. And I knew I had it. I could just tell by the way my body was feeling. I was sweating. I had aches, chills, a gnarly cough. I still kind of have that. So I was like, I've got it. I definitely have COVID. Grabbed one of my instant tests, took it, confirmed. So Greg is home with the COVID for the week, but I honestly feel okay. It did a little bit of a number to me Thursday and a little bit yesterday. I've been drinking NyQuil, taking a lot of vitamin C, multivitamins, but this COVID, it doesn't know who it's messing with. It's going up against the immune system equivalent of Brock Lesnar, so COVID's going to need all the help it can get because I'm about to fuck it up. But unfortunately, I can't go to work when I'm contagious like this, so I'm home for a few days, which gives me a chance to come up here and hang out with you guys and, do our regular podcast without any time constraints and whatnot. And tomorrow for Hell in the Cell, hopefully will be a lot of fun. Looking at the card here, I have, what is this, like 6 matches? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 matches for tomorrow. I've very rarely am I this disinterested in a pay-per-view, although Cody and Seth headlining in the Hell in the Cell is kind of cool. And according to this, it looks like it's the only Hell in the Cell match, just one, right? So the card, it is what it is tomorrow. No championship on the line, no WWE title on the line, but still some good matchups, and hopefully we'll see a good show. Tonight's In Your House. I have been paying zero attention to NXT since the big changeover to the splashy paint and all of that, but I know Braun Breaker is going to be defending the title against Joe Gacy. We got the women's title on the line, North American title on the line, tags on the line, women's tags on the line, so that'll all be coming up tonight. I am not going to predict the show because I don't really watch it. I might check out In Your House, though, tonight and live tweet about it, but in terms of who I think is going to win and shit, I have no idea. But In Your House is coming up just in a couple of hours from now. So that's basically what's going to be on the menu for today. I want to cruise over here to the chat, say hello to everybody, and please ask for your thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber, please make sure you subscribe and stick around. And I want to say hello to some super chats early. One of them is missing. There was a super chat in here earlier. Excuse me. See, I still got the cough. From Off Leather Wings that is not visible here, but I can see it on my analytics page. Off Leather Wings sent in $5 earlier, says, I'm a ref and working a Survivor Series-like show this month. Recommend me some elimination tags to watch. Austin versus Bischoff is already on my list. You guys might be better to suggest more modern Survivor Series tags or elimination tags that were a lot of fun. All my memories are back from, the early days of Survivor Series, which the style that you're reffing is probably not going to match up too much to shit that's going on in 1989. So I got to give that one some thought. There was a couple of good matches at 95 I really liked. The wild card thing that they did, the opener was a lot of fun with Marty Jannetty and Candido and guys like that. So I'd have to give it some real thought there, Off Leather Wings, but I just saw this one a minute ago and I don't have time to really think on my feet for that. So you guys are going to have to offer him some suggestions, and I would probably look at stuff from, like what he's talking about, Austin versus Bischoff. That was, I guess, 03, maybe 03 and Don, maybe draw inspiration from those matches, but that's kind of where my brain gets all jumbled up when it comes to these Survivor Series matches. Also want to say a special hello to Divine Ricks, chiming in with a very generous $10 drop. Hey, Greg, with Punk being injured, do you think MJF could be the next world champion? Have the summer of MJF and potentially have Punk versus MJF in the rubber match when Punk does return. We're going to talk a lot about those scenarios here in just a minute when we start getting into that stuff. See, putting MJF in here somehow, I think would be a great idea based on what they're doing with him. They're trying to make him the talk of the town. I mean, nobody's really talking about Hell in the Cell. It hasn't been a great week for AEW, because of the Punk injury and, maybe some of the perceived issues at Double or Nothing or whatnot, but they've dominated the headlines. Everything has been about AEW, MJF, and now CM Punk. They are dominating the headlines. So with MJF and this whole angle that they're trying to pull off, you've got a chance here to do something that somewhat mirrors what CM Punk did back in 2011 in WWE. And if you're going to do an interim champion, remember John Cena and Punk even had the 2 belts? What if MJF and CM Punk do that stare down like Cena and Punk did with the 2 titles? I don't know if the interim champion is going to have a brand new AEW title. From what I understand, they just have the one, but you would think they would have some backups in case something happens to it or gets stolen. But Jericho lost it, and they didn't have a backup produced yet, so they may or may not have another belt here. I don't know. I couldn't tell when Punk left last night if he actually left the belt in the ring or not. Of course, like we're going to talk about in a minute, he did not relinquish it. But I don't know if he's going to have to temporarily relinquish the physical belt so they can belt up the interim champion and he comes back and challenges him. Or if they try to do the 2 title thing, like we've seen several renditions of the TNT title in AEW. So it wouldn't surprise me if they busted out a new world title either. But imagine MJF sneaking in the back door, winning that battle royal, then beating Jon Moxley. And then at Forbidden Door, he beats Tanahashi or Goto, whoever it is. And he takes the belt. Tony Khan's at ringside, blows Tony Khan a kiss, runs up through the people, goes home, puts the belt in his refrigerator, and tweets out, "Hey, Tony Khan, if you want this belt back, fire me." Summer of MJF. You never know. So we're going to discuss a lot of those potential options, and I'm sure you guys have some ideas as well. Sam3 says interim champ is a bad idea. I'm not sure. I'm not a fan of it either, but I think in certain cases, if it'll work, then I'm open to it. WWE's done it a time or two, I believe, as well with the interim champions. And they've already done it here in AEW with the AEW title as well. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of them either, but I am willing to see how this one plays out. Joshua Aparicio, thanks for the $2. What if MJF sits front row at Hell in the Cell? Well, that's going to take some cooperation from WWE because obviously now, regardless of what happened this past weekend with the with the meet and greet no-show, with the plane ticket, with nobody really knowing what's going on with MJF, if it's a shoot or if it's a work. All we know is that it's a work now. That's what we know. So there's It reminds me of Sable. Now, Sable showed up front row on Nitro back in '99 when she had the falling out with WWE and she left the company, but she was still, I think, under some sort of contractual obligation to them. And they made it look like she just attended the show on her own, and they showed her on camera, and it was all completely orchestrated, but WCW tried to play it off like, oh, they didn't know she was going to be there. So in order for MJF to sit front row in Hell in the Cell, it's going to have to be done completely without WWE's knowing. He's going to have to go on StubHub and buy himself a very expensive ticket and sit right there. But in terms of him being seen on camera and shit, WWE would have to cooperate. They would have to show him, and that's not something they're going to do. So I don't see MJF sitting front row at Hell in the Cell, but if they want to make this work feel believable, that's one way you fucking do it, that's for sure. So we will see tomorrow, but I'm not expecting to see Maxwell in the arena at all, unless he just, and WWE might throw him out. I don't know how any of that works, from a contract standpoint. If you can actually purchase a ticket to your competitor and roam around the fucking audience and fuck with people, I suppose you could. So without getting into too much trouble, he's not really breaking any laws unless it says in your contract that you cannot attend the competition shows. We know WWE doesn't like that. One year, one of those Highlanders or whatever showed up at Impact and they showed him on camera and they fired him. So I think, didn't they? Pretty sure they fired him. He got in trouble, pretty sure for that. So I think if he had Tony Khan's blessing and Tony Khan's like, yeah, go to Hell in a Cell, see what happens, maybe, but I wouldn't put any money on that happening at this point. Good to see everybody else here as well. How Wheezy, Matos, J. Lambo, Tatanani, David Brown, Zane, Michael, lots of monkey wrenches in here, Dreadhead Dre, and George Morris chiming in with $5. Thank you for that, man. Hey, Greg, how are you doing, and how is Bub? Melanie Pillman has died. What do you think of her interview on Raw? Is War from 97. I was 17. Be safe. Melanie Pillman is on my list. We are going to talk about that interview on Raw here in just a little bit. And we last saw Melanie on the Dark Side of the Ring series last year. And very sad that she has passed away, and I do have some thoughts on that. Bub continues to do well. He's very annoying. Because I have COVID, I have been living in this room. If you can see behind me, I've got the whole couch sick bed made up because I don't want to get Elizabeth sick. My girl is about to hike Mount Whitney for like the 5th time in her life. Mount Whitney is the highest mountain in the lower 48. Every other mountain higher than that in the U.S. is all located in Alaska, and she has climbed to the top of it a bunch of times, and she's an absolute fucking boss, and she's got that plan for Monday. So the last thing I want to do is get her sick with COVID before she has to do that. So I am kind of holed up in here all week until this passes, and I'm spending a lot of time with Bub, and he's been doing so well. In February, he was so weak, couldn't walk, couldn't meow, couldn't eat, couldn't do anything. Now he's the most annoying motherfucker. All morning, I'm trying to lay on the couch, trying to sleep. At 8 in the morning, he's in my face. Meow, 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 food. It's pretty crazy because I don't sleep with him at night. They stay in here. So me having to sleep and be with him all night long was pretty funny because he was all up my ass. But the little man is doing very well. Thanks for asking, George Morris. I'll continue here with the shout-outs. Barry is in the house. K-Dog's Kennel. He's got a Judgment Day 2000 review live stream coming up next month. I just need to set, or this month, excuse me. We're going to do that before Forbidden Door. I just need to set a date for that so we can do it. I'm kind of all over the place with the shout-outs, but Jet the Hawk, Ian, Deshaun Robinson, very good to see you as well. Ben Espiniza, Kevin, Sam, Ian, James, Yachiro, Rodrigo, who else we got? TJ, Mohammed, Vash. It's about all I can do for the moment. We got to get into business here. I also want to shout out all the current subscribers on the Patreon page. Chris Broski, Divine Ricks, JJ Legg, Nikita Abelekin, Chris Miner, Super Fluffy Toaster, Deshaun Robinson, Martin Can, Apron Bump Podcast, Alan Carter, Brandon Yelverton, Nick Musser, Jimmy Anderson, K-Dogs Kennel, Ryan Y, Devlin Husband, John Redifer, Claudio Clavedetcher, Reese Jones, Barry MK, Josiah Blevins, John Riffle, Michael Kuma, Blake Moran, Keith Salyers, and Naveed. You guys are the best as always. Thanks for keeping the channel going over there on the Patreon page. And I am working on some other things to kind of help with these live streams. It's hard to describe what I'm doing right now, but I'm working on that. And since I'm home with COVID, I got extra time to work on that. So I'm going to try to get some stuff launched next week or the week after if I can, as it pertains to that. And other than that, I think we should start getting into some of the wrestling news and tidbits and stuff. Also, on Thursday. It took me a long time to get this review up, but finally on Thursday I was able to release my review and experience at AEW Double or Nothing. This past week, it was a blast in Vegas. Had a great time, met up with fans, took a lot of footage at the show, had great seats, and released a review on Thursday chronicling my whole experience. So I don't think I have a link in the description, but you can go right over to my page on the podcast, right at the top of the page. You should see that review that was uploaded Thursday. If you've not seen it, please watch it. It was a lot of fun to go to the show, a lot of fun just to be at my first ever AEW pay-per-view. I was at the Jericho Cruise a couple years ago where they did the Dynamite where Kenny and Hangman won the titles, or the tag titles, but I've never really attended a Dynamite or a pay-per-view before, and that atmosphere in Vegas was incredible. The plan was to attend the show in the Forum on Wednesday. Was really looking forward to going to that because I've never been to the LA Forum. There's a ton of history in that building, and I was really looking forward to going, but we had some crazy scheduling conflicts, and it would have required a lot of work and a lot of hoops to be jumped through for us to be able to go, so we opted not to go, and it's a good thing that I didn't because I would have had COVID being in that building and screaming all on top of people, and that would not have been cool. So I guess that's kind of what you get when you go to a wrestling weekend extravaganza in Vegas and you're surrounded by thousands of people. I kind of asked for COVID, didn't I? So I can't really complain. No sympathy for me. I'm going to kick COVID's ass, and I'll be just fine. But I appreciate all the well wishes on Twitter and the DMs and all that stuff. I'm fine. I'm under the weather, but I'm fine. All is good. It ain't going to stop us, you know? So other than that, we should just be getting into the wrestling news here, and then we'll get into Hell in a Cell. Like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on this past week's Raw. Didn't even watch it. Did watch the Seth promo. Very good stuff. Maybe not as good as the MJF one, but really, really good. I did check out SmackDown last night, and SmackDown was one gigantic steaming pile of nothing. So very little to talk about there other than a new #1 contender for Ronda Rousey. And actually, I shouldn't say that. There was one awesome thing that happened. Madcap busting through the ambulance doors, and looks like they're going through a character change for him, which is really good to see because I'm loving me some Moss. They need to drop the Madcap shit, just make him Riddick again, but liking his kind of his new attitude and his new, just his new badass persona. That's what he should have been all along. The dude looks great, you know what I mean? So we will get into a little bit of that as well, but really not going to get into too much on the TV show results this week because I want to try to keep this podcast to a minimum in case I start losing my voice or whatever. So let's start with, of course, the big news of the week. There's been so much big news of the week in AEW dating back to last Saturday when MJF no-showed that meet and greet. But the biggest news was announced last night during SmackDown, or maybe right before SmackDown. CM Punk had sent out a tweet saying that he is going to be live on Rampage to make a special announcement about his career and the AEW title. Immediately, red flags were shot up all over the wrestling landscape, and there was no real leak of this. Nobody really knew for sure. As a matter of fact, Wednesday, Punk wrestled in the six-man, and Tanahashi came out and was announced as his opponent at Forbidden Door. So it looked like everything was fine with Punk. However, he was hobbling a little bit, and it was noticeable that he was limping. He was complaining to people backstage about it, and then when we went to commercial, after the big MJF pipe bomb promo, apparently CM Punk walked out there to maybe confront or talk some sense into MJF, and as there's some fan footage of him coming down the aisle, you can see that he's limping pretty hard. So he's got a bummed foot. So he does not open the show or close the show. He goes on like third or fourth seg here right before the main event, which was Scorpio Sky defending the TNT title against Dante Martin. So I thought if Punk was going to be relinquishing the title, he would open the show with that, do it, and then the announcers could spend the rest of the hour talking about the situation, putting it over, what they're going to do, explaining to the fans how this is all going to work. So when Punk didn't open the show, I started feeling really good. I'm like, oh, well, maybe he's not going to relinquish it, because if he's not going on last, we know the TNT title is the main event, and he didn't go on first. Coming out in the middle would just be weird. So it implied to me that AEW had to do a lot of thinking on their feet in the last 48 hours. And this is going to be a big learning experience for them because in wrestling, you got to be able to handle those curveballs. And WWE has dealt with this situation, I don't know how many times. How many times has Some poor schmuck won the fucking title in WWE and then immediately had to hand it over. You know, even the Universal title got off to that terrible start with Finn Balor getting injured and having to relinquish the belt. And you're forced to kind of come up with some options that you didn't. Because, I mean, the WWE, we know, has no plan B. They don't even have a plan A. They have no fucking idea what they're going to do tomorrow. But most of the time, you're not thinking like that. So if something does happen and a champion gets hurt and you got to think on the fly and make some decisions about how to handle that, you don't have a ton of time to sit there for a week and think about it. A lot of people thought, and I saw this take on Twitter a couple times last night, that, oh, Punk should have come out on Wednesday, giving them some time to think about it. I understand, but I think the reason Punk came out so fast last night and they got this announcement done is so he can go get his fucking surgery. You know what I mean? Because the quicker he does this, the quicker he can get worked on, get rehabbed, and get back. So waiting a whole nother week just adds another week to his recovery time and all of that. So I can understand getting that out of the way. However, it was a bit confusing how they delivered this news to us. So Punk comes out. I think he was... I've got my Rampage results down here. Yeah, he comes out after, I guess the second match. It was Bucks against Penta and Phoenix. Then we had Athena, Kiera Hogan, and then House of Black introduced Julia Hart, and then we had Punk come out before the TNT title match. So he comes out to the ring, and as soon as he enters the aisleway, he's crying. He is in tears coming down to the ring. He's wearing the belt. Belt looks good on him. Gets in the ring, and you can see the disappointment on his face. And that was, his face told the whole story, because up until then, we didn't really know what he was going to say. Is he injured, or is this just a big swerve and he's going to announce something for Forbidden Door in the Tanahashi match? I was really, really hoping and holding out hope, fingers crossed, that it wasn't as bad as what we were all speculating throughout the night. But as soon as you saw him come down to the ring, you saw the look in his eyes. I was like, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. He's hurt. He's going to have to give up the title. So he goes on to cut a very heartfelt promo and talks about how he said that he's going to work his ass off until the wheels fall off, and he still intends to do that. His wheels are still there. Just one of them happens to be broken, and he needs surgery. So this appears to be a foot injury, not a leg injury. Some people thought it might have been a knee or a hamstring or I don't know, something like that. It's a foot, apparently. He's got a broken foot, needs to have surgery on it. He said that he wanted to relinquish the title and not hold anybody back in terms of, you know, the company continuing to move forward. But Tony Khan believes in CM Punk and told him no, he doesn't want him to relinquish the title. It's merely a bump in the road. We're going to fix this. So CM Punk never really says that he's giving up the belt. Meanwhile, on commentary, prior to Punk coming out there, there's all sorts of speculation from Jericho and Excalibur about Punk's injury. So they're already speculating that he's hurt. And then Jericho, even on commentary, says that Punk relinquished the title. So he has this long, just emotional speech, and you really, really feel for the guy. You really do. And, you know, since he's got this broken foot, maybe that gives him a little bit of a pass on those botched buckshots that he tried at Double or Nothing. You know, obviously wasn't totally 100% there, but really seemed to be heartbroken because he really wanted to be able to be a good champion for them. And like I said, you know, putting the belt on a big name like that, the biggest name your company really has brought in, you know, we talk about Punk's age, his physical condition. He's only going to get older. So if I'm Tony Khan, if I'm AEW, and I want to get my money out of this guy that I paid a ton of money to, who's also right now has a great attitude, he's extremely cooperative. Does CM Punk strike you as the type of guy, at least right now, that if Tony Khan went up to him and asked him to put somebody over, that CM Punk would say, no, that doesn't work for me, brother? All these asinine takes I've seen on social media about, oh, all these old guys don't want to put anybody over. Punk's got the belt and he won't put anybody over. I'm like, what are you watching? How are you twisting your brain into making a take like that? It's insanity. I'm like, Punk is probably more cooperative than he's ever been. He seems genuinely happy to be there, really happy to be a part of the company, try to help it out. He's not doing this for selfish reasons or anything like that, but he is a big name. He is somebody that should be a world champion. He was a world champion in WWE as well for a long time, held the belt for well over a year, multi-time champion, was in the ring with The Rock and John Cena and The Undertaker, and all of the biggest, and Triple H, all the biggest names WWE has had, CM Punk's main evented pay-per-views with all of them. So for him to come in, you probably want to get the most out of him that you can when he's physically capable. So if I'm AEW, he's going to be world champion one day. It's probably better to do this at age 43 than age 46. So if you do it at age 43, when he's pretty much physically about the best he's going to get, that's, I think, when you can probably get the most mileage and most money out of your investment. And then on the other side of that coin, you've got CM Punk as your champion now, which means, guess what? He's going to drop the belt at some point. A lot of wrestling fans have this problem. They think the very last thing that they see on a pay-per-view is the end of the wrestling world. Nothing else happens after that. Nothing. Somebody wins a world championship, they're world champion forever. That's the way they felt about John Cena. They thought they were going to die at 101 years old and Cena would still be champion. That's what they thought. And that's the way they think. That's the way they're programmed to think. But if you could just think a few steps ahead, CM Punk being a champion means he's going to put some motherfucker over. And it's going to be great when he does, especially, there's no telling who he would lose to. He could lose it right back to Hangman, Moxley, somebody like that. But if he put over a younger star or somebody who has not been world champion yet, you know, the way Kenny put over Hangman, that can be a star-building match, and you can use CM Punk to elevate someone else, whether that be an MJF or a Wardlow. You never know. Could be anybody. So I had no problem with CM Punk being champion at all because we get our third summer of Punk now. I was really looking forward to the summer of Punk, but that's not going to happen now. And he is no longer the AEW champion, at least temporarily. So after Punk's speech, he leaves, and it's left fans a little bit confused. I decided I'm going to come up here and do a quick stream last night, so I'm putting together a thumbnail, and as I'm getting my thumbnail ready to come up to do a quick mic drop on the story, we go to the TNT title match, and Excalibur starts talking about an interim champion, and I'm like, Punk didn't say this. Between what Punk said and Jericho said, we were all under the impression that he wasn't world champion anymore, and then Excalibur starts to speed rush these this explanation for what they're going to do, and even that was loaded with confusion. Excuse me, because we were under the assumption, Excalibur says something about there's going to be a battle royal to open up Dynamite. The winner of that battle royal will face Jon Moxley in the main event. So we thought of Dynamite. So we thought that was going to be where the new champion was going to be crowned. Battle Royal, winner faces the number one contender, Jon Moxley, which if you look at AEW's rankings last night, Moxley was number 4 behind Wardlow and a few other people. He was down at number 4. All of a sudden, they're announcing him as the number 1 contender, probably just because that's who they want to have face for whatever reason. So he leapfrogged like 3 dudes. They've since updated these rankings now, where he's now the number 1 contender again, or the number 1 ranked contender, I suppose. And they kind of leapfrogged Moxley into that situation. So that was kind of odd. So we thought that the new AEW interim champion would be crowned on Wednesday. That's what most people thought as Rampage went off the air last night. But then that got clarified even further later on when they said Moxley will face the winner of the Battle Royal in the main event of Dynamite. That winner will then go on to Forbidden Door to compete for the interim world title. On Wednesday, it was announced that CM Punk would be facing Tanahashi. So we were assuming that maybe the winner of the Battle Royal, winner and Moxley, will go on to Forbidden Door to face Tanahashi for the interim championship. But that's not it either. AEW released like a press release today on Twitter where they laid all of this out. So here's what is really going to happen. Battle Royal opens up Dynamite on Wednesday. Winner of that Battle Royal goes on to the main event of Dynamite to face Jon Moxley. The winner of that goes on to Forbidden Door to face the winner of a match between Tanahashi and Hiroki Goto on Dominion. They're going to face each other on June 12th. The winner of Tanahashi and Goto will face the winner of Moxley and the Battle Royal at Forbidden Door for the AEW interim world title. Does that make sense? It does to me now, but last night I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So that's what we're looking at here. We're going to get a couple of matches in AEW, a couple of matches in New Japan. Whoever comes out of the winners of those will face at Forbidden Door at the end of June, and we will crown a new interim champion. So let the speculation begin. What do they do here? I think the Battle Royal is a good way for AEW to think a little bit, because they've got Moxley in position where they want him, and I think Moxley would be a perfectly fine choice to be the interim champion. You need someone you can count on. He never really had a chance to really have a good run because the minute he won the title, COVID happened. And he had his whole entire run in the pandemic era, much like Drew McIntyre did. And a lot of people feel like Moxley should get a legitimate chance to carry the world title. And somebody at some point in AEW is going to have to be their first ever 2-time AEW champion. And I think Moxley's a perfect option for that. I really do. Now, you could also factor in Hangman Page here, get him back into the mix if they want to put him in the Battle Royal. And you could think about Wardlow. You know, a lot of people want to see Wardlow put over as well. Might not be quite time for him yet, but you can't forget about him completely. You know, back in 2014, everybody wanted Roman Reigns to win the Money in the Bank when Daniel Bryan had to cough up the titles and John Cena won it instead. Everybody's, it should have been Roman Reigns. You know, and then when Roman Reigns didn't win the title, they all hated him. So you could do a lot with the Battle Royal, and you could really, like I said, factor in MJF in here somehow as well, especially if you wanted him to sneak in the back door of the Battle Royal, be a late entrant, maybe be under a mask, something like that to where he somehow is able to win. But that means he's also going to have to figure out a way to beat Moxley, and that means he's also going to have to figure out a way, to win at Forbidden Door as well. So that might be a lot to ask for MJF. I think if the scenario was a little bit more simplified, like if we were crowning the champion this Wednesday like we originally thought we might, that's where I would belt up MJF and, think of what you could do with that, especially if they did, we were about to have the Summer of Punk. What if we had the Summer of MJF instead? And he comes back out of nowhere, wins the title. Tony Khan's pissed because he doesn't want this guy to be his champion, but there's nothing he can do about it. And it might be an inverted Austin McMahon type of thing, in 2022. So there's a lot here that you could do. I feel like AEW does have some time to think this through a little bit in terms of what they want, but at the same time, if they wanted just to be simple and put the belt, since Punk is gone, they want to put the belt on someone who is a proven commodity, who they know they can count on, they know they can trust, they know can cut promos, they know the fans like. Moxley's probably the guy. Sure, you could really go crazy if you wanted and have Ricky Starks win the Battle Royal or somebody completely new. But is that really what you would want to do right now? I'm all for, giving guys chances who've never been world champions before to be a world champion. There's lots of guys I think are very capable of holding the world title and doing it well. But this is a situation you got to remember that they weren't planning on doing. So you have to balance, okay, should we try to do something really fun and use this as a way to give somebody else an opportunity? Or do we play it conservative and just keep the title on somebody that we already know is a credible world champion, has held gold all over the world, and we know we can count on him to hold down the fort until Punk comes back and we can resume what we're going to do. So a lot of this, to me, is pointing to Jon Moxley winning the title. The Battle Royal thing is a little odd, why they're even doing that. But if they wanted to surprise us, then the Battle Royal winner should play a really big role in this. So I'm not sure at this point if it's going to be the Battle Royal winner or Moxley, but I feel like it might be Moxley. I feel like he might be the one to come out of this. I can't imagine, and also between the match between Goto and Tanahashi at Dominion, I think Tanahashi's going to win that too, because I really like the idea of Tanahashi facing the AEW World Champion anyway. So I think maybe this is New Japan's way of kind of doing what AEW is doing, and just not automatically giving Jon Moxley the match like they're doing with Tanahashi, make him work a little bit for it first, perhaps. But if we wind up going to Forbidden Door and it's Mox and Tanahashi for the title, sure, no arguments for me. But you also have the opportunity, to do something really crazy. But if you wanted to do something like MJF, a lot of times stuff like this takes a lot of planning, and this isn't anything that they were planning on doing. One thing I've credited AEW with a lot is their ability to plan, their ability to book out their TV shows to make them exciting. The Dynamite and Rampage and pay-per-view experience is, like nothing fans have seen in wrestling since the Attitude Era, where WWE Raw and SmackDown, every single show and every single segment is completely phoned in and formulaic. There's nothing special. You don't feel anything. You don't get emotionally invested in shit that they do most of the time, where AEW really tries to be the opposite of that. So they're good at planning. What they might not be so good at is thinking on their feet. And that's why all of this stuff is growing pains. All of this stuff is going to be a learning experience, because let me tell you, if AEW thinks they're never going to have a world champion get hurt again who has to relinquish the belt, they are crazy. Happens all the time in wrestling. It sucks when it does. And companies are always forced to figure out an alternative when that happens. Sometimes their decisions are great, sometimes not so much. We've seen that in WWE. Sometimes how they handle a situation like this is amazing, and sometimes it really, really pisses the fans off. It just depends on how much thinking and planning and long-term stuff goes through it. Good example of that is when Daniel Bryan, after WrestleMania 30, had to relinquish the title, and then they put the belt on the line at Money in the Bank. And I knew what they were going to do. I could see the writing on the wall. I'm like, Brock is facing the champion at SummerSlam. That's what they're doing. So Brock is going to be your new world champion at SummerSlam. Does not matter who the champion is. If Daniel Bryan never would have gotten hurt, he would have taken that title right into SummerSlam and lost it to Brock Lesnar. That's what they were going to do. So in my mind, it didn't matter who won Money in the Bank, because they're losing to Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. So, of course, when John Cena won, it's Cena always wins, and Vince sucks his cock, and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, brothers, sisters, think 3 steps ahead. I'm begging you. How can you not see that this is the plan here? So I had really no issue with that. So AEW finds themselves in a similar situation, regardless of what you think of this, or if you think that's going to be, if they're making the right decision, wrong decision, try to think about the future implications of what they do and how this is going to play out throughout the summer, going into All Out and all that. How we don't even know how long CM Punk is going to be out. It might just be an 8-week rehab. We don't know. 12 weeks. He might be out 2-3 months, be back by Labor Day. We don't even know yet. So I think AEW generally has a better sense of that than WWE sometimes, in terms of being able to determine how this is going to play out down the road. And if they want things to go a certain way and they start planning for that, like Tony Khan might have in his head how he wants things to go, but that's all going to be pending CM Punk's rehabilitation and his health, and if he's able to get back within the timetable that they've laid out for him. So all sorts of stuff depends on how this is going to play out down the road. So does AEW want to get cute and put MJF under a mask, have him win the Battle Royal, beat Jon Moxley, win the title at Forbidden Door, and blow the kiss to Tony Khan, leave through the crowd, jump in a speeding car, go home, put the belt in the fridge, and then text Tony Khan or tweet Tony Khan, say, you want this belt back, you have to fire me. And then maybe Tony Khan says, no, I'm not going to fire you, and MJF comes out on Dynamite finally, after Tony Khan trying to get him to come to TV, and MJF is just ghosting the company. They have no world champion. Finally, he shows up and he's got the title, and that's when CM Punk comes back. He's got his title. You do the belt hold-up thing, and that could be fun. So I think the AEW here has an opportunity to capitalize on the buzz that MJF has created with this whole thing on Wednesday. They definitely have an option here to do something. They can plan things in the next few days to figure out a way to put the belt on MJF, because that's just going to be a whole bunch of, that's going to be a whole lot of controversy all summer long, and it's going to be great. Or, like I said, do they just play it conservative, play it safe? No, they got a proven guy in Moxley. We're just going to go with him until Punk gets better. Like, what do you think is the best option? You got to put yourself, and forget about us. Like, a lot of times what I want is vastly different than what I think the company might do. What I want sometimes isn't best for the company in the long term. Sometimes a lot of fans want instant gratification. We want to be able to see what we want without any worry about what's going to go on in the future. That's the way most fans are, including myself. So that might not be, even though we have all these great ideas about what to do with the belt, that might not be the best thing to do when you're looking at stuff long term. So, this is something that I think AEW needed to experience, because sooner or later, I mean, we've already had the pandemic. There's been a lot of speed bumps thrown in the path of AEW, and for them to spend half of their existence, you hear that? Half of this company's existence has been spent in front of no fans. So for them to be able to continue to do business like this, put on TV the way they do, pay-per-views and whatnot, shows me that they really do have their act together. For the most part, there's still some issues. We've got problems with the women. There's the problems with the Thunder Rosa. We don't even know, or with Thunder Rosa's TV time, we don't even know if Jake Atlas works for the fucking company. Tony Khan has fumbled a few things that he's handled, like the big swole stuff. So nothing's ever going to be perfect. But overall, I feel like they've got a much better grasp on on the future and what's best for the company and stuff. But what they haven't really had to experience is really getting hit in the face or kicked in the balls with some devastating news, like a newly crowned champion being injured. That sucks. So we've seen, it sucks the worst for the fans because we have to go through this so many times in WWE throughout the years, dating way, way, way back, over 20 years now. And now AEW is finding themselves doing the same thing. So the next time this happens in AEW, I expect them to handle it better because this could have been handled better. It could have been explained better. Everything was very discombobulated and not well laid out at all last night. And I think that was a lot of because they were trying to figure this shit out too as they went. They needed to get this information out there, but how they delivered this information and how they executed everything definitely could have used some work last night. I'm not going to lie. But at least we know now what the situation is. There's no more confusion. We know exactly what's going to happen. It's convoluted and confusing and maybe too convoluted for its own good, but at least we know what's happening. And we'll see on Wednesday what goes on Dynamite, the winner of the Battle Royal. That'll be a big indicator there. Whoever wins the Battle Royal will be a really good indicator, I think, of who will wind up being your interim champion. Because if it's Lance Archer, or something, he's not going to win. So Moxley's going to beat him, and Moxley will go on to Dominion. So the winner of the Battle Royal has to either be MJF, Wardlow, or Miro, or somebody like that for me to believe that it's going to be them, not Moxley, going to Forbidden Door. Right now, all of my money is on Jon Moxley, but we will see, and we will be watching Dynamite together this week, so make sure you join us. We're going to get into the MJF situation here right now as well. MJF, as we saw on Dynamite, scathing shoot-style promo, very loose cannon Brian Pillman-like. He was so angry and screaming in the camera. A lot of people compared this to CM Punk's pipe bomb in 2011. It had a little bit of that, but this was much more Pillman. This was much more Piper to me than CM Punk. The cool thing about MJF is that he has got so much material to draw from. He's got the loose cannon Pillman, he's got Roddy Piper, he's got CM Punk from 10 years ago. There's so much inspiration here to draw from that he was able to really cut one of the craziest promos I've ever seen. Some people didn't love it. Some people in the company said it reeked of desperation. But when it comes to this whole situation, I kind of like it. I think it's fun that they're going completely overboard with this and that MJF is going ape shit on the mic, screaming into the microphone, telling Tony Khan to fire him, dropping F-bombs. He was amazing on Wednesday. So he kept going and going until they shut his mic off. And then in the upcoming days or the other days this week when we started getting more information on that, AEW had dropped him from their roster page and maybe removed his merch. I'm not sure. So they're really kind of all in on the work here. And Fightful Select provided an update on this yesterday as well. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but some of the things mentioned in that article was a lot of the talent's feelings on the MJF situation. And that some really didn't care about it. Some were a little bit frustrated or uncomfortable, felt uncomfortable about how the talent is not kept in the loop. And like what I said, all week long is that, Tony Khan, even himself, has said that he doesn't really want to get in the habit of working his own talent. I don't think the talent will really much appreciate that either, but there are certain situations that you do want to keep quiet. WWE does the same thing. A lot of times when wrestlers are coming in, they're hidden off in the trailer so nobody can see them and text out or tweet out that they saw somebody or spoil anything. So, sometimes they might want to keep things under wraps as it relates to that, but in terms of everything that went down between MJF and AEW this past weekend with the meet and greet and that stuff, it sounds to me, what I'm inclined to believe here is that this whole thing was definitely a shoot to begin with. MJF and Tony Khan have worked out, had some sort of a meeting, obviously, and have at least temporarily worked out whatever they're going to do, and now we're into full-blown work. So if this is going to result in MJF getting a new contract behind the scenes, or if it's just an agree to disagree thing with Tony Khan, I think if MJF was willing to come out and do all of this, some sort of an agreement or an extension has had to have been talked about. Otherwise, for them to go through with this, if they really think they have a chance to lose MJF in the near future, to let him cut that promo on Dynamite would be pretty crazy. Unless Tony Khan's like, fuck it, I want to show him that I have confidence in him. Yeah, he doesn't have a new contract right now, but, I fully plan on giving him one. I don't know. But he's got that introductory money, that those AEW originals first got. Since then, so many WWE talent and a lot of other good talent have been able to come in, get signed, and make a lot more money than MJF. He has legitimate frustrations there, but I always just thought that stuff that would be worked out. MJF will get a contract extension and he will get the money that he is owed. And if they do use this as a way to actually put the belt on him, then he's definitely going to get paid. So it's definitely a work now, but AEW is playing into it by, shutting off his mic, removing him from the roster page, and he's technically, and he asked Tony Khan to fire him on TV. I don't believe Tony Khan in kayfabe has done that yet, but that situation combined with what's going on with CM Punk could result in some pretty crazy shit going down this summer. So we'll see if anything happens here on Dynamite on Wednesday, if MJF shows up, or if they just keep him off TV and they keep his situation separate from the title situation. It's very possible that they do that and they want to continue this with MJF. But for them to go where they went on Wednesday, for them to go there and have a promo like that, you do have to wonder if it is a little bit of a put up or shut up. I mean, he's got a ton of buzz, and if you had him steal the championship or become champion somehow, I think that could really produce some substantial ratings for them. I really do, because MJF is he's the talk of the town right now, maybe even more so than CM Punk. So those are the two big stories going on in AEW. We'll monitor them throughout the course of the week here and see what they wind up doing, but it's sure is interesting, to say the least. So that's my take on all of that. And like I said, we'll be addressing that more, maybe even tomorrow during the Hell in the Cell review. Lemmy Cruz over here to the chat. I owe you guys some more super chat shout outs. I want to thank Zane G for the very generous $20 drop there. What's up, Mike Work? Hope you feel better soon. Here's my scenario. Have MJF under a mask, eliminate the last competitor, adding shock value. TK is ultimately pissed. Have TK groom Wardlow and defeat MJF to become champion. I like that. The only problem is Wardlow has already destroyed MJF. But if TK actually puts Wardlow in that scenario, I don't know if you want to have Wardlow associated with Tony Khan, because Tony Khan's he's a heel with most of the wrestling fans who are all butthurt about AEW existing. That's a big problem for them. So they are pissed at him. Plus his rant at the media scrum over CM Punk and Eric Bischoff's comments, everybody's upset with him and stuff. I'm like, is it really the worst thing in the world to have a promoter that's passionate and cares about his people? To complain, oh, Tony Khan behaves crazy and stuff. I'm like, you must have been born 18 years ago, because if you can sit there and look at Tony Khan and think that he's any crazier than Vince McMahon, who's tried to fist fight reporters when he doesn't like questions being asked to him. Excuse me. Paul Heyman, acting like one of the biggest jerks ever, calling out the other federations, constantly doing things to trash WCW, trash WWE, calling out the networks live on air. Eric Bischoff giving away the results of Raw, and acting like just a complete prick in general. And the guy hasn't had really any good ideas ever. The most, and Eric Bischoff, when he speaks on AEW, the things that he criticizes AEW for are the things that he was the biggest offender of. So just because of all that, if I'm Tony Khan, I am laughing off Eric Bischoff's comments. I'm not upset with Tony Khan defending his guy. I'm upset with Tony Khan responding at all. Eric Bischoff isn't worth it. That is a grain of salt type of comment, because when people like that say shit that's just so blatantly hypocritical, you know that their issues are with themselves. They got some fucking problem with AEW, like a lot of fans do, so they twist their brains into such knots, they spew out the most ridiculously asinine shit, just because they have a problem with another company existing besides WWE. And anybody who says anything about Tony Khan, you can have your opinions about Tony Khan all you want, but when people say things like that's not how a wrestling promoter should behave, you must be 9 years old, because you have no fucking clue about how wrestling promoters behave at all if you'll make a statement like that. That's all I'm going to say. So I think Tony Khan, after a long day, imagine the day he had at Double or Nothing. Imagine when his day started. What time do you think he was up? 6 a.m., going all day, dealing with the MJF stuff, figuring out a pay-per-view, figuring out who's going to go over and booking the show, and then showtime and all that stress of being live on pay-per-view, a 4.5, 5 hour long show, whatever it was. Then you got to talk to the media for a couple of hours, and then you hear something like that. He just went off. God forbid we have a passionate promoter. Can't have that, can we? My God. So when Tony Khan gets all hot and bothered about something, let him. The fuck does it matter to you? It makes no sense. People just get so uppity and mad about the dumbest shit. What is it? Touch grass, fresh air, touch a boob. Go do all that. Maybe Tony Khan won't bother you so much. But we'll see what goes on in the future. That's a good scenario to lay out there, Zane. I'm not sure about the Wardlow part, but I like the idea of MJF in a mask, because how else is he going to win that battle royal? He's going to have to be entered into it, which means they're going to have to explain something on Dynamite quickly, because they probably didn't intend to have MJF back this quick. So after his promo on Wednesday. So if they do bring him in for the battle royal, they're going to have to explain something. They're going to have to do what WWE does a lot and pretend they didn't say something that they said, or pretend they didn't do something that they did, and just forget about it and go this direction instead. So we'll see how they handle it, and we'll see if MJF has any presence at all on Dynamite, because it's not a guarantee that he will. We have some sad news to report. The wrestling world this week has lost Melanie Pillman. Melanie Pillman, of course, was the ex-wife of Brian Pillman, the mother of Brian Pillman Jr., and she passed away this week. Brian Pillman Jr. made the announcement on Twitter, posted a nice photo of his mom and said, "Rest in peace, and I love you." And that's really all we know. I have not looked into any further about her death. Last we saw Melanie, she was part of the Dark Side of the Ring series last year on the Brian Pillman episode, and we have seen her on WWE TV, back in the day, 25, 26 years ago. She was first seen on the Raw episode where Austin invaded Brian Pillman's home and he had the gun. Kevin Kelly was there. Pillman was laid up on the couch with a broken ankle, and Melanie was right there at her side with that great rock and roll 90s hair that you'll love to see. And then unfortunately, 1 year after that, just about exactly 1 year after that, when Brian Pillman would pass away, in still one of the most bizarre segments I've ever seen on Monday Night Raw. I've spoke about this before and how uncomfortable and just fucking disgusting it was that he did this. One day after Brian Pillman passes away and they make this announcement at Bad Blood, the site of the first ever Hell in the Cell, the very next night on Raw was one of the weirdest Raws in WWE's history. It opened up with DX, Shawn bragging about his Hell in the Cell win over The Undertaker, showing the curtain call on the Titantron. Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler mentioned WCW by name for the first time ever on WWE programming, and they discussed the death of Brian Pillman. And for some reason, they had Melanie Pillman do an interview via satellite from her house, where she's just sitting there on a couch with her head down. And this is a woman that's had all sorts of, personal problems and probably wasn't in a very mentally stable place as it was. And Vince was asking her questions about Brian, and did she have any idea? And, insinuated there might have been some drug use and things like that. Imagine them trying to do this today. Imagine them bringing the wife of somebody who dies onto, it was so bizarre. It made me feel gross. It made me feel extremely uncomfortable. I thought it was hugely disrespectful, and it was, I guess WWE, you got to remember it was still in the Monday Night Wars, so obviously Pillman dying is going to be a really, really big deal, and WWE wanted to talk about it. Maybe they thought they could get some ratings for the segment, which I believe they did, but just for Vince McMahon to have this woman on TV less than 24 hours or 24 hours after she finds out her husband passed away, and to be asking her questions was pure insanity to me, and it was still, I think, easily to me, the weirdest segment in the history of WWE programming. Not just Raw, but I'm talking about anything they've ever done. Oh, excuse me. COVID's, man. But Melanie clearly and obviously did have some problems. Brian Pillman had several children. Of course, Brian Jr. is Melanie and Brian's son, and as we saw on Dark Side of the Ring, Melanie, the years have not been kind to her. The years of substance abuse, I should say, have not been kind to her. She has really struggled with that stuff. You could tell physically she had just done a lot of drugs in her life. Not all of Brian's kids were really happy with Melanie. Some even had mentioned that she took all of, Brian's life insurance money and bought shit with it. And she was very selfish, and she didn't sound like a really great person, to be honest. And a lot of that was because of her demons, her substance abuse, and all the issues that she went through. And even Brian Jr., it was nice to see. It gave me a little bit of peace of mind at the end of that episode, because I was one of the biggest Brian Pillman fans ever. I just think Brian Pillman is a trendsetter. He's a fucking icon in terms of how he changed the game on the microphone. I even think Pillman set the table for Stone Cold. I really do. So you credit Brian Pillman with a lot in terms of how the business evolved, whether fans find that good or bad. But, for Brian Jr., to see him at the end of that dark side of the ring, walking with Melanie, acknowledging that things aren't perfect, but they're trying to have a relationship. They're trying to reconcile. She's trying to do her best to make amends for all the fuck-ups she had. And he said that they don't have a great relationship, but at least they have a relationship, where prior to that, I think things might have been a little rocky. Now, Brian Pillman's children, who were with other women, do not like Melanie at all, and he'll hold a lot against her because of what she did and how she, kind of did the family wrong financially and things like that. She was a very troubled woman, and a lot like Pillman, she just really, a lot like Brian, she really battled with life, her whole life. So it's sad that she has passed away. That's a bummer. Like I said, no word on whether this was natural causes, maybe something a little bit worse. I'm sure we'll find that out. I just, once I saw she passed away, just condolences out to Brian Jr. and, and everybody else. It's a sad situation, and her whole life just seemed like it was just one giant sad affair, and she was never really able to, plant her feet and get her shit together. And it was just a constant dramatic mess from day one with her. So rest in peace, Melanie Pillman. Just out of respect for Brian Pillman, I will, refrain from, any sort of negative comments on her or, anything that she did beyond what I've said here. Because, just because of Brian Jr. and stuff. I grew up watching Brian Pillman, so you don't like to hear about this stuff, and it's sad. So rest in peace to Melanie Pillman, and condolences to her friends and her family. We wrap up some very bad news with some really good news. Big congratulations to Sammy Guevara and Ty Conti, who got themselves engaged in Paris. I guess they're in Paris or something, or maybe they were in front of the Eiffel Tower. So I guess they took a trip overseas there, and Sammy Guevara did propose to Ty Conti. Congrats to the both of them. They got all sorts of love from all of their peers. On social media, not so much love from all the fans, who, of course, have just got a big, jagged, thorny, sharp stick lodged so far up their ass over these two. I know they don't like it when they flaunt their shit or whatever, but one guy under the post says, "Oh wow, Sammy does this every 6 months. He'll just propose to someone else next." I'm like, really? I've proposed to 2 women before. Does that make me a piece of shit? Who are you to judge what somebody does with their life? Who are you to assume that you know things about Sammy? Who are you to assume that he did Pam wrong in some way? Pam herself has come out defending the both of them, said that she's even reached out to Ty Conti and Sammy Guevara, to show support. She has no ill feelings towards either of them. She was not done wrong. They were broken up before Sammy and Ty Conti got together. And so for fans who can't understand why you would propose to your girlfriend on TV and then you would just get with somebody else, I'm like, maybe you've just never had a relationship and you don't understand. Things change. Sometimes people break up. You never know what the wind is going to blow. And it's always sad when relationships end. But I think fans insisted on making this something evil. They insisted on setting in their minds that Sammy had cheated on his wife and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Even if he did do that, it's still none of your business at all. And to make assumptions about somebody who you don't know, who you've never met, who wouldn't take a piss on you if you were on fire, to assume all of this shit about their personal lives is gross, and y'all need to grow up. Best of luck to Sammy and Ty Conti. Hope they have a wonderful marriage. They're both very young. Hopefully it all works out and, they stay together for 100 years, but this is wrestling, and we know how wrestling relationships tend to be. So when it comes to Sammy and Ty Conti, we just we wish them the best. So happy for them. Really, really, really happy for them. Like I said, Jeff Jarrett was the latest guest on Broken Skull Sessions. I watched about 90% of it last night, stopped right before we got to the TNA stuff. Didn't have time to get into that, but Jarrett and Austin did go through Jeff's entire career for the most part, and they kicked things off right off the bat by talking about the perceived heat between the two of them, dating all the way back to some payoffs from Jerry Jarrett. And then, of course, the promo that Jeff cut in 1997 when he returned from WCW and mentioned the Austin 316 thing. And then there were always rumors that Austin never wanted to work with him because of that, and they never really did work with each other in WWE other than that one stunner where Austin did the strut. So right off the bat, they hashed that out right away. They talk about the Jerry Jarrett stuff. They don't get too much into that promo, though, that he cut, and it was almost as if they kind of avoided that subject, and there were a couple of subjects that they avoided, but they talked about their history. They go way back to Dallas, and and then also USWA. They had matches together when they were both super young, back when Austin outweighed him by 60 pounds, and Jarrett was still very young, and getting his feet wet and stuff in the business, but comes from a long line of wrestling promoters and stuff, and has a lot of history in the business. So him and Austin, I should say, go way back. So they kind of hash out all the heat first, then they talk about their early start, or Jeff's early start, and then coming into WWE and becoming the Double J character and the country music star, bringing in the roadie, doing the deal with Sean at In Your House where he leaves, and then he would, a year later, go to WCW to become a member of the Horsemen for a very short time, and only stayed in WCW for 1 year, had a 1-year deal, left them the following year, showed back up on Raw, and did that shoot promo that they did show a lot of footage of where he talked about Eric Bischoff. This is only a couple of weeks after Brian Pillman's death that I just talked about, when WWE first started mentioning WCW by name on TV. Vince McMahon pretended they didn't exist up until this point. Next thing you know, they're talking about them left and right on commentary. Wrestlers are bringing them up in promos, and here Jarrett is talking about Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan and his boys and Randy Savage, and going on and on about WCW, and shit on Bret Hart a little bit, and then also shit on Stone Cold Steve Austin, talking about how Austin 316 offends him as a religious man, and apparently that really pissed Austin off back in the day, because that was going to affect his business by Jarrett saying something like that if those ideas get into the wrong skulls. So Austin kind of hinted at that, but they never spoke about that. They even showed footage of that shoot promo and did not show the part where Jeff Jarrett mentioned the Austin 316 stuff. So they hashed it all out. They seemed totally cool with each other, but that still is there. Austin almost basically admitted that there was a little bit of an issue there, and that's why they had this perceived heat, even though they have seen each other many times. Jeff Jarrett was a guest on Austin's podcast back in the day, a few years ago. Austin mentioned that they had dinner together not long ago, a year or so ago. So they have had plenty of interactions over the last 25 years, and anything that did go down back then is water under the bridge now. So they made that known, but they did kind of avoid talking about a couple things, which I thought was odd. They also didn't talk a ton about Deborah, because Deborah and Austin, of course, were married, and they had a pretty ugly divorce, I believe. Jarrett and Deborah go way back, not only from WCW, but also in WWE. And so they then talked about his return in 97, and then in 99 when they kind of went into that, or 98 when they went into that Don't Piss Me Off era, shaved his head, carried the guitar, became more of a guy more suited for the Attitude Era. And then in 99, he would team with Owen Hart. And of course, they talked about Owen Hart's passing and how sad that was. And then it was time for him to head off back to WCW again when, his contract situation was up in 99. He talked about the match with Chyna, talked about how Jim Ross got in some trouble for letting that contract lapse, but also talked about how he and Vince McMahon parted with a handshake, parted on good terms, only for Vince to fire him live on TV during the night of the buyout when he said, G-O-O-N-N-E, gone. And they kind of joked about that a little bit, but it was misleading. Like Jeff Jarrett was insisting that everything was fine on WWE's level with him and WWE, and there was no issues, but we all heard that he was kind of like blackballed from WWE. That was kind of the reason why he went and started TNA. So on one hand, Jarrett was saying that there was really never any bad blood with Vince McMahon, but it's really hard to ignore what Vince said about him on TV. Jeff himself even said when Vince said that the night of the simulcast, he assumed that he's going to be working a program with Vince McMahon, and that was not it. He just, and I think he did the same thing to Luger, because Luger, Lex Express, he said something about that too. Luger and Jarrett are both guys that kind of jumped and left abruptly, and Vince didn't appreciate that. So it was a little bit misleading how Jarrett was, describing everything, but overall it was still a really, really good watch. If you haven't watched it, check it out. I'm going to finish the rest of it tonight. Just have maybe 15, 20 more minutes left to go, and it's going to be mostly about his run in TNA. So I still have to watch that. But so far, Jarrett on Broken Skull Sessions has been really, really good and really interesting. So check it out if you have not yet already. The Rock's daughter, Simone Johnson, who's been training at the NXT Performance Center for quite a while, yet to make any sort of TV debut, has announced her new ring name, and it's going to be called Ava Raine, R-A-I-N-E. And a lot of fans were like really, really mad about this. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm the first one to shit on WWE's name changes, okay? They're fucking dumb. They're so horrible. They sound so bad. Braun Breaker, for real? For real. Braun Breaker. But good mic work, it was his idea. I don't give a shit. It's still the stupidest name in the world. I don't care if it was fucking Obama's idea. Doesn't matter. It's a stupid name. So I am usually not a fan of WWE name changes, but for the fans to get so uppity about this, and be upset with her, I immediately tweeted out support and say, I support Ava Raine no matter what. When you are the daughter of the greatest of all time, you got quite the big shoes to fill. And yes, sometimes second, third, and fourth, like Simone is, generation stars do adopt the names of their parents, but sometimes they don't. There's been plenty of times, Brian Christopher, Michael McGillicuddy, and all sorts of other examples out there of people not using their legendary parent's name. And I think this is fine for Simone to be Ava Raine. I got really no interest or no issue with it. I wouldn't mind if she was Simone Johnson either. But when it comes to WWE's really, really stupid names, this one is just moderately dumb. It's not that bad. Ava Raine. Most WWE's names either sound like real names or porn star names, one or the other. So with this, I'm really not against that because that takes a lot of the pressure off. I mean, you come in as, you can still acknowledge her as The Rock's daughter. You don't have to not acknowledge that. But to give her own persona, her own attitude, her own name, and try to get the fans used to her that way is probably, a good idea when you have a parent the star level of The Rock. It's not like this is Don Morocco or something. This is The Rock, the biggest fucking movie star in the goddamn world. Household name has exceeded even Hulk Hogan's fame. From the 80s, if you ask me. So she has got a lot of pressure on her. So I think changing her name is really not that big of a deal at all. And again, it's just an introductory name. Let's not freak out. Everybody in NXT, when they come to the main roster, they change their name anyway. They already gave fucking Eli Drake, the LA Knight name, and then they changed that. Now he's Max Dupree. Tell you what, Max Dupree, you ever talk that close to my face? Knuckle sandwich, motherfucker. So I'm not freaking out about this. Even if she's Ava Raine in NXT, WWE might see how she develops and really like her and say, wow, she's got a lot of The Rock's mannerisms and she's got a lot of The Rock's, just a lot of his kind of his moves, his abilities, how he speaks. She might remind a lot of people of The Rock. And then when she gets to the main roster, if she's good enough to make it through NXT and get called up, then you can fuck with her name again if you want. Change it again. What's the big deal? There's no rules how many times you can change your name in WWE. They can do it all the time. So this, of all the WWE name changes, this one bothers me the least. So best of luck to Simone Johnson. We love you. Jake Atlas was arrested this week as well for a pretty gnarly situation regarding his boyfriend and some domestic violence. I'm going to refrain from saying who the boyfriend is because that name is now out, but it's not my place to be talking about that. But he was arrested for domestic violence after attending a party where there was supposed to be some sexual stuff going down. He got mad because not the right attention was being put on him, and he started punching and kicking and slapping and stuff. So police were called. He was arrested. And the biggest story here is that nobody really knows the status of Jake Atlas with AEW. He was, after NXT, he supposedly went and signed with AEW. He was even given the AEW graphic, All Elite graphic, but you don't see him on the roster page. And AEW has made no statement about this at all, which is a little bit irresponsible. Even WWE, when somebody gets in trouble, even if it's a generic, stupid statement, like when the Usos get a DUI, they're responsible for their own actions, and we'll keep an eye on the situation or whatever. At least that's something. So AEW, if one of their own, and I don't know how many matches this guy's even worked on, in AEW, how many dark matches he's had. I haven't seen him on TV at all, really, if he's even made it to TV. So it's not like he's a major star or anything, but if he is under employment to your company, he is under contract, it's your obligation to come up and at least make a statement about this, about what went down here. So I haven't heard anything new about Jake Atlas, but the confusion as to whether or not he is an official member of AEW or not is a little bit confusing. WWE has, this is so typical WWE. This is exactly what they do. They have now moved Lacey Evans back to SmackDown. So she ran 5 weeks or something of those fucking vignettes on SmackDown, only to debut in a very heelish way, which felt odd. And then they decided the next week to move her over to Raw. She comes out on Raw. Then they announced that she's going to wrestle on Raw. I believe it was supposed to be last week, but they changed their mind on that. And she attended some Coca-Cola 500 or some NASCAR race or some shit over the weekend, and then claimed that she was recovering from the race. What was she doing at the race that she had to recover from? And now it appears that she has been moved back to the SmackDown page. So this is just a clear example of WWE never knowing what the fuck they're doing. I am not confident at all that this company can properly wipe its own ass. They never know what they're doing. They have no plan, no vision. If I was a wrestler there, I would be so frustrated with them just making these willy-nilly decisions about my life and my career that are just, they have no thought whatsoever put into them. They've had so much time since Lacey Evans got pregnant. Think about that. She has been out for, a year and a half now? They've had all of this time to figure out a direction for her and what to do for her. There should be no excuse for them changing shit up left and right for her. You've had fucking 18 months to figure out what you're going to do here. What the hell? What gives? How come you are so discombobulated about this whole thing that you don't know where she wants to be? They don't know if she wants to be a heel, or if they don't know if they want her to be a heel or a babyface or Raw or SmackDown. They have no idea. So now apparently she's going to go back to SmackDown, which is where I thought she should have stayed. If they were going to keep her a babyface, I would have turned Ronda Rousey heel and had Lacey Evans be the one to beat Ronda Rousey, because Lacey's big, she's strong, she's got time in the military, she's probably a legit badass, probably can really scrap. If you're trying to find somebody who could physically and believably take on Ronda Rousey, Lacey Evans, I think, would be one of those people. So even though I think the whole gimmick and the whole thing that she's doing is really not my cup of tea, I could see WWE going in that direction. So when they moved her to Raw, you're like, what the fuck? And now she's back on SmackDown, where she probably should have never left to begin with. Get your shit together, WWE. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. You guys are so all over the place, it makes my balls hurt. I swear to God. So anywho, that's pretty much the end of the wrestling news that I wanted to get into. We got to start predicting Hell in the Cell here soon. Also, one other little news tidbit here is WWE has announced that they're going to be producing a new Ric Flair documentary. Now, Ric Flair, they had given him his release, and after that Plane Ride from Hell, Dark Side of the Ring episode, looked like WWE was really distancing themselves from him. Now they're going to be producing a whole new documentary, 2 hours long, with Fox Sports' Tom Rinaldi, and they're vowing to reveal never before seen footage and never before heard stories about Flair's career. And this is all very bizarre to me, because I thought WWE wanted to kind of distance themselves. So what I kind of think this is WWE not being too happy with Flair's reputation, but at the same time, he's Ric Flair. And I think they want to try to keep him under their umbrella until he dies. Does that sound right? Does that sound bad? Basically, I think WWE, even though they're a little bit weary of Ric Flair and how to handle him, at the same time, the last thing I think they want is for him to go to AEW and die while being a contracted AEW star. I really think that's what they want to avoid. So if they're going to do this brand new documentary, it's going to be 2 hours long. It's going to be very, very detailed. Maybe it will be used as a rehabilitation piece. Maybe it's going to be used to paint Ric Flair in a better light than what we've seen from the dark side of the ring and, some of the other women that have stepped forward and told stories about Ric Flair. Something tells me that's WWE's goal here. And I also kind of think that they don't want, because we all thought that a lot of Ric Flair's bad rep was going to blow over. And once it did, AEW could potentially bring him in, do some old school Four Horsemen stuff, or do some stuff with Tully or Arn, or just make an appearance somehow. We, of course, know he has his last match scheduled for SummerSlam weekend, which I think this documentary might even be paired with that. They might be working on it now to release it around that time, I think is what the deal is. So that kind of makes me feel like WWE just doesn't want him. They don't really care what Ric Flair does. They just don't want him in AEW. And I can kind of understand that mentality from WWE because Ric Flair's getting very old. Fucker could live to 110 for all we know. He is not of this universe. But, Flair with his health and his age and stuff, I think Vince McMahon and WWE do not want him to sign like a 5-year deal with AEW and then die when he's under contract. I just don't think that's what they want. So I can kind of see why maybe they're trying to keep him at arm's reach and just so they can still claim him. You know what I mean? So that's kind of weird. But the documentary, I'm not sure what they could really tell us in this thing that we haven't already learned about Ric Flair over the last 40 years. But apparently there's going to be some interesting stuff in that documentary. So we'll keep our eye on that. SmackDown and Rampage last night. Rampage was a pretty good show too. The Young Bucks defeated Rey Fenix and Penta, which was a great match. Athena made her in-ring debut defeating Kiera Hogan, which I really liked. And of course, Scorpio Sky defeated Dante Martin in a really good match in the main event for the TNT title. The only problem was most of our minds was just focused on the CM Punk news and the bombshell that he just dropped in the previous promo. So Rampage was pretty good, despite the bad news. SmackDown, like I said, big pile of nothing. The only thing we really saw was the Brawling Brutes defeating New Day and Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre did officially issue the challenge to Roman Reigns for Clash at the Castle, which is coming up in September, essentially spoiling that Roman Reigns is going to be the champion for that long. So we'll see how that goes. Also, Ronda Rousey's next challenger has been set. Natalya won a 6-pack challenge, and she will face Ronda Rousey, not tomorrow, just in the future sometime, for the title. Madcap Moss busting through the ambulance doors was fucking incredible. Had a match with Baron Corbin. He lost via DQ when he went ape shit with a chair on Corbin. They have now announced a no-holds-barred match between these two for tomorrow. And I really hope, now that the suspenders are gone, that Madcap is going to be gone as well. Hopefully they just won't call him Moss and they will go back to Riddick Moss or something. But the Madcap Moss was supposed to be that goofy character. He was put in a dumb angle and a dumb situation, and he got himself over. The only thing that's going to harm this man is the company he works for, because he's got potential out the ass. Great look, he's a legit badass, he can wrestle, and he's tailor-made for WWE, just with his look, his size, his presence, and everything he does. I really like Moss a lot, so I hope that tomorrow when we see him come out, he's not Madcap anymore. Shouldn't they lose the Madcap thing for him? Am I not crazy there? Wouldn't it be weird to keep him Madcap if he's like angry Mr. Brock Lesnar, man? I just think he should have like a regular fucking name and not something stupid like that. So that was all good stuff. That was my favorite part of the show, is just seeing Moss act like a badass. The main event saw Riddle and Nakamura lose a tag team title match to the Usos. Nakamura got hurt, got taken away. Roman's music hits, distracting Riddle, allowing the Usos to retain the title, hitting him with the splash or whatever happened there to retain. Wasn't paying much attention to SmackDown last night. Plus, I was watching it on an illegal stream because I can't get SmackDown to air live for me here on the West Coast. I have to wait. So not much happening on SmackDown last night on that go home. And that leaves us with Hell in the Cell. First, before we do, well, actually, we're not going to do that. We're going to do Hell in the Cell first, then we'll roll through the In Your House stuff, because I think the kickoff show for In Your House is either on right now or it's about to start right now. So I'm sorry for us overlapping with that. But let's quickly predict the 7 matches we have for Hell in the Cell. I have not given these matches a ton of thought. So I'm just going to kind of wing this here. And we will start right at the bottom with Madcap Moss taking on Happy Corbin in a no-holds-barred match. This, of course, was announced last night on SmackDown. And since Corbin got the win via DQ, Moss all the way here. I say he annihilates Baron Corbin and wins. And hopefully, like I said, he's not Madcap after tomorrow. U.S. title on the line. Theory taking on Mustafa Ali. I'd say they're probably going to keep the belt on Theory here. However, let's just be weird and predict Mustafa Ali to win the title. Why not? I say Mustafa Ali becomes the new U.S. champion and then drops the belt back to Theory. Actually, no, forget that. Theory is going to retain here. I'm really looking at these matches for the first time, so I'm trying to think. I don't trust WWE at all with what they do with Mustafa Ali, so I don't know why the fuck I picked him right there. Let's abort that and have Theory to retain the championship. Well, that means there's going to be no title changes on this show. Okay, we're going to backtrack a second time. They brought Mustafa Ali back. They actually bring Ali back in after all that time, asked for his release. Hopefully things have worked out and WWE wants to at least make use of him now. So let's change our mind for a third time. And yes, I am going to predict Ali to win the United States title. If he does, though, I think he's going to cough it right back up to Theory because I think WWE's got big plans for Theory. But let's say Ali wins one here and wins the U.S. title. Why not? Let's predict that. What's the worst that can happen, right? We've got Finn Balor, AJ Styles, and Liv Morgan teaming up to take on the Judgment Day in an intergender 6-person tag. This is going to be Edge's first time in the ring with the short hair. I guess we got to go Judgment Day on this, don't we? I mean, if we're going to keep Balor and AJ and Liv together for a longer amount of time, then yeah, I would maybe put them over here. But I think Judgment Day, fuck, man. I guess I should have thought about all these predictions before we actually did them. Part of me thinks the babies could win that, actually. You can protect Edge. Liv can pin Rhea Ripley. Let's go baby faces. Let's go Balor, AJ, and Liv to beat the Judgment Day. Why not? Let's just do it. I'm just winging these predictions here today, as you can see. So I'm either going to look really, really, really smart or really, really stupid. And I'm fine with either of those outcomes, to be honest. Ezekiel taking on Kevin Owens. Ezekiel and Owens, what is going to happen here? I'm going to predict Owens to win somehow. I still think the Ezekiel stuff is great. It's a lot of fun. Hell, like I said last week, if they would have had some better planning here, they could have recorded a bunch of shit with Elias before he shaved off the beard. Maybe they could even do a deal where like Elias's music hits and it distracts Owens and Ezekiel rolls him up for a quick schoolboy and gets a pin on him or something. I don't know. But, Owens, after that match with Austin at WrestleMania, I don't think he needs to lose to Ezekiel here. So even though I think Ezekiel could pull some fast ones here and get the win, I think in the end, Kevin Owens will win. Maybe he'll even get some help from Chad Gable or Otis or something like that. We've got a handicap match. Bobby Lashley taking on Omos and MVP. I'm going to go Omos and MVP in this. I think Lashley beat Omos at WrestleMania. Then he beat him. Did he do the arm wrestling contest? He beat him there too. And then he beat him in the cage match, right? When Omos threw Lashley through the cage. So I think Omos and MVP are going to pick up the win here over Lashley. So I'm going to pick them. Bianca Belair defending her Raw Women's title against Asuka and Becky Lynch in a triple threat. Bianca. Keep Bianca rolling. I'm not taking the belt off of her yet, so I don't know who she's going to pin and how that's going to be executed. This wasn't the original plan, obviously. Everything got screwed up with Naomi and Sasha walking out. So Bianca Belair to retain the title. With that match, I like all three of those women almost equally the same. I really do. Maybe I'd still put Becky third. Bianca, Asuka, and Becky, I'd probably rank them. But I'd be fine with any of them winning it, especially Asuka. Actually, I should take that back. Maybe not Becky. I don't think Becky should win back the title here in this match. It would be weird and a very weird timing of that, unless she won it only for Bianca to face her at SummerSlam and beat her in 5 seconds like Becky did to her. Any of that stuff could happen, but I don't think it is. Bianca Belair will retain the women's title in that match, and that leaves us with our main event, Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins, Hell in a Cell. Cody and Seth have had a few encounters so far. Cody Rhodes has not lost in WWE. This doesn't seem like a match that they would want him to lose, although he's been he's been pretty dominant in the Seth Rollins feud. So I'm inclined to throw Rollins a bone as well. But I think with WWE's plans for Cody Rhodes, I think he kind of has to win this match here unless they really pull some crazy shit and have Rollins squeak out a victory. Maybe he does some really crazy stunt to get him a win, or to, somehow, I guess he can't really cheat in a Hell in a Cell, but to do something to give him an unfair advantage. He can beat Cody Rhodes, and then you can forget about Cody's loss right away in a couple of weeks when they do Money in the Bank and Cody potentially wins that. So I think you could afford a Cody loss here if you have plans for him to win the Money in the Bank briefcase. I think he can lose, but him not losing yet is kind of cool, and I think Cody should really go on that strong run because WWE is clearly all in on him, no pun intended, and they intend to make his push and his run a very, very big deal. The tie-ins with his dad and all of that. A lot of bizarre stuff going on, too, with the Cody countdowns. A lot of what he is doing is very heelish stuff, or what WWE is doing with him, and that's why I think they, like MJF in AEW, WWE might want to capitalize while the iron is hot with Cody Rhodes, because after a while, the fans might start turning on him. There's a lot about Cody Rhodes that the fans would not like. He's Charlotte. He's a male Charlotte. He really is. He came in privileged, got to walk right in the doors of pro wrestling because of who his parents were. Luckily for him, he's a good-looking kid who's very athletic, just like Charlotte was, and they were able to do well. But that perception of that things are handed to them, that's what Charlotte goes through because of how easy she had it. So Cody, even though he's got a great story, he's not like his dad. Charlotte's a little more closer to Flair than Cody is to Dusty, but Cody is not a plumber. Cody, is not does not have the same common man type of persona and vibe that Dusty does. Cody has, I'm the center of the universe vibe, So I feel like that will wear off with fans eventually, and they will maybe start to turn on him because this is the WWE audience we're talking about here at the end of the day. But Cody Rhodes has not been in a Hell in a Cell match before, in a singles match. I know he did the deal with Legacy and who the fuck was it? He's been in a match before in Hell in a Cell, but it was a multi-man deal. Something with Legacy, I forgot. But one-on-one, he hasn't done one yet. So Cody and Seth inside the big red Mattel toy, Cody's first high-profile singles Hell in a Cell match. I guess I'm going to put him over here. So I'm going to go Cody Rhodes over Rollins again. Rollins is really going above and beyond here if he does do the job here, putting Cody Rhodes over. And I hope this results in a Seth Rollins title victory down the road. I would love it if Cody wins all of these matches now, goes on to win Money in the Bank, somehow wins the WWE title, and then Rollins is the one to beat him for the title. Maybe that will make up for what they're doing here. But it sounds like Rollins is in Triple H 2005 mode. Get this guy over, the way Triple H did with Batista. So I guess I'm going to pick Cody. I am not confident about any of my predictions. I literally thought about them, didn't think about them at all until I read through them. That's why I've been so all over the place. But just to recap, I'm going Madcap over Happy Corbin. Mustafa Ali to capture the U.S. title. I'm not confident about that, but I think we need a title change here. I'm going with the baby faces, Balor, AJ, and Liv to beat the Judgment Day. It's another kind of a strange pick. Not many people are probably picking. I'm going to pick Owens over Ezekiel, Omos and MVP over Lashley, and Bianca Belair over Asuka and Becky to retain her title. And in the main event, Cody to defeat Seth Rollins in a Hell in a Cell match. And I think that match is going to be really good. I think Cody and Seth have the ability to surpass Seth and Ambrose, Seth and The Fiend, Seth and anybody else that he's been in a Hell in a Cell match with. And Rollins, this is not his first rodeo, so he's got a little bit more experience in recent history with Hell in a Cells than Cody does. So you tie all that in. I'm still picking a Cody victory tomorrow. So we'll see. Join us tomorrow after the show for a full show review. Just quickly here, since In Your House is about to start, I know the kickoff is on now. NXT champion Braun Breaker defending against Joe Gacy, Mandy Rose versus Wendy Chu. Don't even know who that is. Cameron Grimes versus Carmelo Hayes, North American title. Tag champs, Pretty Deadly versus the Creed brothers. Don't know who any of them are either. And women's tag team titles, Toxic Attraction against Katana Chance and Caden Carter. Caden Carter, I know, and Katana Chance is Casey Catanzaro, right? And she changed her name to Katana Chance. And Legado del Fantasma against D'Angelo, Stacks, and Two Dimes. What does that mean? So, yeah, I'm so out of the loop on NXT. It's ridiculous. I don't even know if they're going to have Todd Pettengill on In Your House here or not. But, yeah, I've completely checked out from NXT. Don't care at all. We'll watch it. We'll be somewhat interested in it. Probably check out a little bit of In Your House tonight. But I don't even know who half the people on this card are. That's your good mic work for you. So anyway, that wraps it up for today. I got to get out of here. This podcast went a little bit longer than I expected it to. Let me cruise over here to the chat, knock out any remaining super chats, and ask you guys to hit the thumbs up button out the door if you don't mind. Steiner retains tonight. Yeah, I don't think Joe Gacy's going to beat the Breaker Man. Is Spaz the only one here? Oh, no, Spectre. Let me go up here. I just really don't want to miss anybody. Zane, I got that very generous $20 one from you earlier. And Spectre, appreciate that $9.99, my friend. Just hopped in. Don't know if you spoke about the AEW title yet, but apparently Mox called out Tanahashi a year ago, but COVID got in the way, so maybe that'll be the title match for Forbidden Door. That's a good point. And that might be, we talked a lot about this, Spectre, so you can just rewind a bit and see this and listen to that. But I think that Tanahashi is going to beat Goto at Dominion. So I think he's going to advance to Forbidden Door to get the match that he was always going to have. And since AEW is kind of leapfrog Moxley, making it seem like they want him to be their guy, I can totally see them finally getting that Tanahashi and Moxley match done. You're probably onto something there. And like I said, as you'll hear if you rewind and listen, unless something crazy happens with MJF under a mask or some big swerve happens in the Battle Royal, Moxley is kind of feeling like the guy that AEW is going to go with. And that's fine with me. Spaz Phoenix, also want to say hello to you and thank you so much for that $20. Hey, Greg, Kat, and chat. I'm late to the party, but I'm going to say by the time Punk is back, there's going to be a Punk Mox MJF situation. Also, Hell in the Purcell predictions are up, and I'd love some more conversation around my Sasha Naomi commentary. Yeah, go show Spaz Phoenix some love. Check out his predictions, see how his compared to mine, because mine are crazy for Hell in the Cell. And yeah, when Punk comes back, that's going to be interesting depending on how long it takes him to come back, how many weeks or months he's gone, and when he comes back, what the landscape looks like when he gets there. It's going to be a big deal. And that is something to look forward to, a Punk return and how they're going to handle that regardless of how you feel about the interim championship. Thank you for that, Skull Vikings. Atlas tore his ACL match in his debut match against Cole. I did know that, but still just wasn't sure if he was under contract to them or not, so still a lot of unanswered questions there. So yeah. Oh, and speaking of Max Dupree, he was on SmackDown last night and announced that next week he's going to announce his first stablemate, his first client in his stable of male models. So we'll have to keep a lookout for that. Thank you very much for being here, guys. I appreciate you hanging through me during this COVID stream. And like I said, I will be live tweeting tomorrow during the Hell in the Cell. And after the show, we'll be up here talking about the whole thing. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your Saturday, and I'll talk to you soon.